Were posted on the agenda. Our hearing today is your public part of this legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your position on the proposed legislation before us. The committee members may come and go during the hearing, and it's just part of the process. We have bills to present in other committees, and I note here that Senator Conrad is presenting 2 bills in other committees, so she may be in and out. I ask you to abide by the following procedures to better facilitate today's meeting. Please turn off or silence any electronic devices. As your bill comes up that you're planning to speak on, remember that the first row is reserved for the testifiers for that bill. We'd ask that as those chairs become available, if you're planning to speak, just keep moving forward so that we see who's all going to be speaking. The introducing senator will make initial statement, followed by proponents, opponents, and those in the neutral testimony. Closing remarks will be reserved for the introducing senator only. If you're planning to testify, please pick up one of the green sheets over on the table. I'd ask that you'd fill it out. Please write legibly. That asks for your phone number. Do not fear that we're going to give that out to anyone. That is simply to call you in case there's confusion with your testimony to make sure that it goes in the record properly. Let's see. If you want to record your presence here but not testify, there are white sheets that you can sign up on the table, and it will also give you a chance to identify yourself as a proponent, opponent, or in the neutral. If you have handouts, we ask that you provide 10 copies. Please give them to the page when you come up with your green sheets. And if you don't have enough copies, let us know and we'll have the pages make some copies. When you come up to testify, please speak into the microphone and clearly state your name and then spell both your first and last name. We'll be using the light system today. How many are here to testify today? Yeah, we're going to roll the dice. We're going to go 5 minutes. All right. 4 minutes green, 1 minute yellow, and then when the red goes on, you have completed your testimony. No displays of support or opposition in bills, vocal or otherwise, are allowed during a public hearing. Committee members with us today will introduce themselves, starting on my right with Senator Conrad, who is here.
Just in the nick of time. Hello, good afternoon. Danielle Conrad from North Lincoln.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Raybould, Legislative District 28, the center of Lincoln.
Good afternoon. I'm Rita Sanders. I represent District 45, which is the Bellevue Offutt community.
And I'm Ray Aguilar, represent District 35, Grand Island.
John Lowe, District 37, Kearney, Gibbon, and Schultz.
Steve Heller, District 33, which is Adams, Phelps, and Kearney County.
All right. Dick Clark is legal counsel. Senator Sanders, vice chair. Julie Conham is a committee clerk. And today we have for our pages, Logan and Sophia. Is that right? Good. I like being right. Okay. Let's go ahead and move to LB 712. Senator Hardin, welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman Brewer. Good afternoon, fellow senators of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm Senator Brian Hardin. For the record, that is BrianHardin, and I represent the Banner, Kimball, and Scottsbluff counties of the 48th Legislative District in Western Nebraska. I'm here to introduce LB 712. LB 712 creates the Ground-Based Strategic Deterrent Deployment Fund. This will be a one-time transfer of $26 million from the Cash Reserve Fund to the Ground-Based Strategic Deterrent Deployment Fund. First, I'd like to explain how we determined the format for this fund. We used the same format used in the past for funds that were intended to be used at Offutt Air Force Base. This fund will be under the care of the Adjutant General of the Nebraska National Guard. We felt this was appropriate because if you can imagine Offutt and the operations that happen there to be a spear, then the ICBM facilities in Western Nebraska are the tip of that spear. the very pointy end that keeps our enemies up at night. It may come as a surprise to some of you that there are intercontinental ballistic missiles located in western Nebraska. In fact, there are roughly 150 missile launch facilities and 15 missile alert facilities in the Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming tri-state area. Nebraska is home to 80 launch facilities and 9 alert facilities. These facilities were built in the 1960s and 70s. They currently house the Minuteman III missile with technology that was developed when JFK was the President of the United States. The federal government has decided it's time to update these facilities with the latest and greatest in the world of ICBMs. We are expecting roughly 3,700 workers to be brought to the area for this project. While the official location of the home base camp for all these workers has not yet been officially announced, all indications, according to the military, are that the home base will be located in or very near the city of Kimball, Nebraska. Now, let me put that into perspective. According to Google, in the year 2021, the total population of Kimball was 2,258 people. The workers alone for this project will cause the population of Kimball to swell to 1.65 times. This does not include any workers that may bring some family members with them to the area. The Panhandle of Nebraska is a beautiful area and a wonderful place to raise a family. Some workers may bring their families with them when they see our gorgeous landscape and meet the wonderful people of Kimball, Banner, Cheyenne, and Scottsbluff counties. All this is to say, I believe the true number of people coming to this area is higher than the 3,700. I'd like to direct your attention now to the colorful pamphlet handout labeled Exhibit A. This is a breakdown of the identified ways the money would be used, as well as showing how state funding will be combined with local and federal funding to accomplish the goals of making sure the communities of the Panhandle are not harmed by the massive influx of people. Most cities can typically handle 3% growth year to year. The Panhandle, specifically Kimball, is looking at a 165% population increase quickly. That's a scary number. But the people of Kimball, Sidney, Scottsbluff, and Gearing are up to the task. But I know they would not only appreciate some help from the state, but would also like to not be forced to tax and bond their way and their neighbors through the missile project. I won't bore you by reading through the entire pamphlet you've received, but from a 100,000-foot view, the identified areas of need for these funds are public safety, water, wastewater, electric, roads and trails, recreation, regional public transport, childcare, and economic development. I'd like to mention that one of the testifiers that will follow me today is Christy Warner. Christy is the director of the national award-winning Kimball County Transit Service. And I strongly encourage you to ask her questions about that wonderful service for the Panhandle. Next, I would like to direct you to the one-pager you have labeled Exhibit B. This will give you a brief description on Panhandle development. The Sentinel weapons system, that's the system that will replace the Minuteman III that's currently there, and a snapshot on Panhandle schools. A couple things I would like to specifically draw your attention to would be the bullet points under the Sentinel weapons system. No state or local money will be used on the military project itself. This project is getting completely and separately funded from the military. It's noted the military project is approximately $86 billion. Yes, that's with a B for the full deployment. But I can tell you that after my trip to Vandenberg Space Force Base 2 weeks ago, that the 86 billion is no longer correct. That number is growing. In fact, it has grown so much that the military basically said, we have stopped counting. I've been told this. This will be the biggest expenditure on a domestic project in the history of the United States. The final handout to discuss is Exhibit C. This is an economic impact study that was prepared by Dr. Ernie Goss from Goss and Associates. It's a very detailed study, and I believe Dr. Goss is here today to testify, and he can answer any more of the technical questions far better than I can. But I would like to direct you to page 5, table EX1, under the executive summary. From this study, it was found that the state of Nebraska can expect a $1.29 return on investment for every $1 spent on this legislation. I believe it's important to point out that this study was done for a projected period of 7 years. The missile project is now projected to be a 10 to 12-year project. Tell me, when was the last time the federal government finished anything on time or on budget? I thank Dr. Goss for his very good work with this impact study. I believe it's possible that the ROI for the state could end up being more than the identified $1.29 by the time this project is over. You will also find a letter from Deb Cottier of Shadron, co-chair of the Nebraska Economic Developers Association. Due to the distance from Shadron and Lincoln, and sometimes we get weather out there, Deb was unable to be here in person, and she asked that I share her letter of support. I think it's important to remember that regardless of what happens with LB 712, the military is sending 3,700 contract workers to the Panhandle. No matter what we do in this body, the Panhandle is going to have to find a way to manage through the challenges that come with this type of project for at least a decade. For Lincoln, growth of 1.65 times would be going from about 290,000 people to 475,000 people in a short period of time. For Metro Omaha, they would go from 860,000 people to 1.4 million in a couple years. Behind me, we have several testifiers from the community of Kimball, including some high school students who are here to share their stories and passion for the community of Kimball, as well as a representative from Sydney who's here to testify. I want to thank the committee for its time today, and we yield to any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hardin. Could you share with us a little about your experience as far as being able to go out and see some of the area that's going to be going through the construction? And then where all did you get to go to better understand the overall mission?
2 weeks ago, along with some of the people sitting behind me, we went on a civic-oriented trip as leaders, and the Department of Defense invited us to travel from Warren Air Force Base to Ellsworth Air Force Base on out to Vandenberg Space Force Base, then back to Warren over a period of 3 days. They let us get up at 4 in the morning, and usually they put us to bed late at night. And it was a meaningful trip on a C-130. Hit my head on it. If you get that chance, pass on that. The pinnacle of the trip, and what was interesting, is that, as you may recall, we had some balloons floating around that week. And the main reason for the trip at that time was to witness the launching of a Minuteman III, the types of missiles that are in the ground out in our area. Frankly, that was not in response to those balloons that were flying around. That missile launch was actually scheduled 5 years ago. They do those missile launches 2 times a year, in February and in August. And essentially, they pull a couple missiles out of the ground and they take the nuclear loads out of them. They put dummies in there. They fire them 7,000 miles down into the South Pacific. And it's amazing technology to watch, particularly if you look at the one that we saw was actually manufactured in 1974. It's a signal to our enemies and to our friends that we can shoot something 7,000 miles and 23 minutes later it comes down and it hits a target the size of a car. North Korea fires something and they hope to hit something the size of Alaska. And typically they do not succeed. So it's impressive, even though it's old technology. Part of what we learned during that journey was the fact that we actually built a system to replace the one that's 50 years old. We gave it away because we felt that was wise for the safety of the world. So that peacekeeper system that we built to actually replace these missiles went to NATO and our allies in the last few years. This new one is called the Sentinel system. It's the latest and greatest technology, and that went up. We learned lots of things on the trip, including this pin represents the B-21. That will be the replacement for our B-1 and B-2 bombers. It will be a stealth aircraft, one of these flat things that is very stealthy, and those will be built in the South Dakota area near Rapid City at Ellsworth Air Force Base. We got to see lots of interesting things there, including their cold spray unit. It's basically 3D. It's amazing what is being done. And they wanted to impress us. They did. They impressed us. And I was most impressed with our military. From the lowest private to the generals I had the opportunity to meet. These are professional people who know why they are there. They have a sense of mission and vision and values. I work in that area, in the world of mission, vision, values, performance management in the corporate world. And what I experienced was second to none.
Of the 3,700 workers, they'll all be civilian, or how many would be military that would be a part of the actual construction?
That number, we are told, will be the civilian workforce.
Okay. All right, let's see if we have questions for you. Any questions? Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Senator Hardin. I'm really curious about the timing of this programming. When is the award going to be announced and enacted on? Because I think you also prefaced it that the government works pretty darn slowly. But I know this has an emergency clause, and so I'm trying to get my handle on a better understanding of the project timeline
They
and
started
award.
the planning for the project many years ago. And so truly, we probably would have been in the same seat had they not given our last system away. And so it's actually been in process for many years. I spoke with someone from the FBI who is going to have a hand in watching what goes on from a security standpoint. And they said that they have personally been involved in the development of the project for at least 5 years.
So I was curious that you had an emergency clause that this requires an immediate transfer of $26 million.
Correct. An interesting piece of that is that the timeline has essentially moved, and I'm not sure it's moved as much as it has been a timeline that has shown in places 2026, 2025, 2024, 2023. It seems to me, as I piece it together, that the timeline on all of it has to do with who you're speaking with and when do they come in to do their part of this gigantic journey. So it's not that the numbers are on the calendar have been incorrect. It's that you have to put it into a context of they indeed may be coming along 2, 3, 4 years after someone else, but literally we're told to expect people on site this year.
Well, again, that goes back to my, because it does say to declare an emergency on the distribution and transfer of the funds. Does that
Right.
seem realistic or?
Yes, there, and you can see inside the exhibit or the document we gave you, they have performed an environmental impact study. It's on the edge of the town, about 80 acres. And so these folks are going to need infrastructure. They're going to need sewer pipes run. They're going to need water provision. They're going to need electricity, so on and so forth. At this point, the cost of those streets, the cost of everything that goes into that is falling to the town to provide that for these federal contract workers. And here they come.
So this would be an assistance to the city of Kimball to allow them to do the infrastructure. But again, when is there a timeline placeholder when we'll hear definitively for doing something like this? I know you're saying it's like a moving target, but
Right.
I just get focused on then why do we have to declare it an emergency? And shouldn't there be a sunset clause? So if this doesn't happen, I mean, we can have a placeholder for it,
Right.
but it should be probably held in escrow or reserve until there's definitive word that they're going to implement this with 100% certainty.
Well, we know with 100% certainty that the federal government, the military is coming because the missiles are already there. So it's not like we're hoping to build something, they're coming. And so there are those behind me who I think can probably speak to the timeline more definitively than I can.
So the current missile system, has it been there, I think you said 50 years?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of struggling with the emergency issue on it because it may be, and I'm certain probably someone else could testify to the timeline. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Good to see you, Senator Hardin. Welcome to government. I think maybe this is our first chance to welcome you.
It is my first opportunity.
Very good. Very good. Well, and thank you for all this helpful information. I'm really old school and I like to marker up everything and drill down and read it. So I'm quickly glancing through things right now, but we'll read it in greater detail throughout the course of the hearing. And if I don't get it all today, over the weekend, what have you. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions. So $26 million is a fairly sizable request in terms of appropriation. So, and I know that this ship has sailed, but I do have some questions and concerns about why an appropriation of that magnitude is before the government committee instead of the appropriations committee, but we'll deal with that another day, I suppose. Do you have a sense, and maybe other folks might know, if it's not the full amount? I see that there's a proposal here, a certain amount is dedicated for different aspects of infrastructure or childcare or wellness center, what have you. Kind of what would be the top priority amongst that array of different ideas that are presented if the full amount is not available? Do you have a sense about that?
The prioritization, I do not have
Okay,
a sense in terms
okay.
of what order do they come in as most poignant.
Okay.
My sense is that what we really wanted to try to do was to keep our town from being harmed
Sure.
since it's growing by that magnitude and that quickly. Our ability to bond our way out of that amount of money is essentially nil if we do not get some help.
Okay.
There were not dollars for this included
Okay.
in the governor's budget. We are in constant conversation with Senator Deb Fisher's office,
Okay.
sitting on Armed Services.
Yes.
We're in constant conversation with Congressman Smith, since this is a part of the 3rd District.
Yes.
We've been in constant conversation with the FBI. And that's kind of where a lot of this got started was, I guess I shouldn't say a lot of this got started. One of the first questions I had was, how do we stay safe when you more than double, maybe even triple the adult population in a small town? What do we do then? And so that's kind of what got the ball rolling on some of this, was just to make sure that all is well and is good and that our town remains whole through all of this.
No, I understand and appreciate that, but I'll tell you just a quick glance at the thoughtful materials that you shared this afternoon. I mean, one thing that really jumped out at me was the recognition, of course, and the need to build up our childcare infrastructure across the state and how that really impacts working families in every corner of Nebraska, and is kind of a recurring theme, I think, in regards to a lot of different economic development and workforce challenges. So I was pleased to see that identified as kind of one of the top pillars of this plan, and was thinking that perhaps if we, had to make challenging and difficult choices, to try and figure out kind of what might be something to help out as part of some broader strategies in terms of workforce. And then the last question, just because we're starting to get to that point in a session where, we're trying to kind of sort through all the different bills that are coming before our committees. We're trying to kind of figure out where we are with our personal legislative agenda. And I know that, obviously this is a very important measure that you've brought forward and been working hard on with a lot of different stakeholders, but you've prioritized another measure regarding legal challenges for religious discrimination. So
Right.
Do you put that measure that you've prioritized above this?
I have someone else who's prioritized this bill.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Senator Rabel.
You know, reading the bill, I hope you can help me understand because it starts out, the state treasurer shall transfer 54,700,000 on or after, but before June 15th. So is this a continuation of like transferring this? And then the next section shall the transfer $15,580,000 and it goes on transfer 53 million. And so help me understand
And if
the
you,
language.
and if you
Yeah.
skip to the end where the punchline is, it comes
punchline.
down to 26 million is the total ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then why would they include all those?
That's the existing law.
That is the existing law?
So there,
It is? Oh, okay. So
Okay.
that's already in place. And so, thank you, go to the punchline. The punchline is $26 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any additional questions? Senator Holler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you, Senator Hardin. Thanks for bringing this. You're quite a cheerleader for Kimball and the Panhandle. I'm proud of you. That's a lot of
You should
enthusiasm.
see them step kick.
Anyway, so getting to the impact on the community, positive impact, but yet it has to be dealt with that exponential growth, right? I can't give specific numbers, but at the advent of World War II, Naval Ammunition Depot was built near Hastings, Nebraska. Some 50,000 acres. Took several years to, well, it wasn't complete even at the end of World War II. But it was a massive point I'm trying to make here is, and I don't have specific figures, just anecdotal stories about the impact that it had on Hastings with that sudden influx of population. And it was quite overwhelming. I suspect at that time, I don't know again, I suspect at that time Nebraska wasn't in any kind of position to do what you're asking the Nebraska Legislature to do for you here, and that is to help build up some of that infrastructure to manage that. Because I can tell you for Hastings at that time, it was overwhelming and really was not manageable from the perspective of a local community absorbing that kind of growth. So I applaud you for this. You're anticipating this, and I think it's a worthy ask.
As I recall, that's a naval yard outside of Hastings.
Correct.
Which is an interesting experience to drive through Nebraska and find a naval yard.
Yeah, it was. Well, and there were bases built around Sydney as well throughout the state, Grand Island, similarly for ammunition depots. This was an ammunition depot, happened to be for the Navy. People think it is quite odd that you'd have something like that, but it was centrally located and logistically located in the center of the country, which meant it was as easy or as difficult to go either direction with the ammunition. But overriding at that time was they didn't have missiles that could reach the center part of the U.S., continental U.S. And so it was a relatively safe place to build those things. But bottom line is, it was overwhelming for Hastings. They made it through it, struggled through it, but it could have been a lot smoother if there would have been some anticipation and some foresight. So anyway,
All right.
that was not a question, I'm sorry, but that was a statement.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Senator, thank you for bringing this bill forward. I appreciate it. Offutt Air Force Base is in my district and it's so connected. And when you're in my district, West Nebraska seems like a long ways away. Depends who you're asking, right? But they're so much connected to what they do out at Offutt or particularly STRATCOM, what happens in your district. My question actually is the infrastructure that you're asking for support, will that stay in place for the citizens to benefit from once the project is complete?
My understanding is yes. And again, there are those following me who can speak to that more definitively. On the housing front, what we've been told is that the military plans to roll in the houses, the trailers, and then they'll roll them out when they're done. But these streets and all of the infrastructure in them and around them will remain.
Right, okay. So eventually maybe we can use them in
Yes.
Kimball as, thank you. I always, when we have a possible mission or capstone that comes through, I always use that as an opportunity to recruit. We want a workforce. They're a great workforce, and if they perhaps want to stay, let's show them a house. But what a great way for Western Nebraska to host the military and the civilians in your community.
We're very proud of them and look forward to it.
So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Senator Rabel?
So Senator Hardin, I don't know if you know this answer, but I'm guessing there's got to be other missile sites throughout the United States. And so probably several of those need upgrades too. So are we competing with other communities in prioritization to like this is?
We're the first, and there are essentially three main sites, as I understand. So this is the first of those three to be built out.
Senator Connery?
Sorry, this interesting discussion piqued two more quick questions. Thank you for your indulgence, Senator Hardin, where I think we're all trying to dig in and get our heads around this. But so let me ask this question. If this committee does not advance the measure or doesn't end up as part of a budgetary package, what happens if no money is provided this year? What happens to the project?
Well, my sense is
If you know.
that
if you know.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I can guess as well as anyone in the room and say that there might be those who would say, well, the town just has to go out and go into debt through bonding and figure out how to come up with, how to pay these costs of building out this infrastructure.
Okay.
The problem is that a town that is that small simply doesn't have the ability to do that. And so
Okay.
that's kind of where we have our backs up against the wall. And so it's been an interesting process to watch it come about and so forth.
No, and it's helpful to know. I mean, obviously, you did a good job extolling the virtues of the project and the vision and the plans. And I'm just trying to kind of think on the other side of the coin, what happens if this appropriation doesn't move forward, either in this amount or this year with that vision kind of piece. And maybe a testifier after you can dig into this, or maybe it's deeper in the materials. But I'm also wondering, if you have any information about the considerations in regards to like the siting of this project, if the local infrastructure doesn't exist to support this kind of project, why is it cited as a priority? I mean, I would think that would be something that would be very important to the people who are, the missiles, I guess, is your foothold or your foothold or anchor in regards to the siting of it. But I'm just trying to kind of get my head around that. If we feel like we don't have the infrastructure, that just seems problematic.
My sense is, and I'm speculating.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to figure it out.
I'm speculating when I say this.
Okay. That's a good thing. We can.
I think the military looks at this and says, we have to secure America, and these are the biggest guns in the world. And I think they're looking at this and saying, this is so sensitive that I know that they have considered multiple sites
Okay.
for where this workforce would live, because I know they're deeply concerned about the integrity of the entire project.
Okay.
If you were our enemies would be crazy not to be deeply interested in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share more later, but we know they're very interested
Okay.
in this, what's going on.
Okay.
And so multiple sites for this workforce have been considered. Our sense is this is where it's at, mostly because this is where the environmental impact study has taken place.
Okay.
Those take a long time.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm really eager to continue the conversation with you and hear from the other testifiers, but those are, I think, some of the questions that percolated during your opening. So thank you for your graciousness.
I guess just so you understand too, the job I had at Offutt was aboard the airplane that made the decision to launch not just the ground-based thermonuclear weapons, but our submarine-based and our bomber fleet that has nuclear weapons. All of that is woven into the mission of STRATCOM. So this is an extension of STRATCOM, and that's probably, the more Nebraska connection there, because ultimately, as they go up the food chain, that's where it ends for the folks that are in the silos in western Nebraska. Okay, any other questions for the senators? Senator Lowe.
Thank you. And not to belabor the opening here, but we're talking about infrastructure. So infrastructure has to be in place before everybody else moves in, because once they move in, you can't put infrastructure in, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And that's hence the E clause. Thank you.
All right, one more time around. Any questions? All right, let's see. And General Bohack, are you speaking on 712? Okay, I'll invite you to be next up if I could.
I'm testifying neutral though.
You're testifying on? Oh, okay. Well, that threw me for a loop. All right, Senator Hardin, thank you for your opening. All right, so let's see. Ernie, you're speaking in the neutral or, okay, we got a lot of neutrals. Okay, we're going to start with proponents to LB 712. Come on up. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer, committee members. I'm Annette Brower, for the record, ANNETTE, Brower, BROWER. I'm the city administrator for the city of Kimball in the beautiful Panhandle of Nebraska, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about our side of the state. Kimball's future is very different than its past. We are no longer in a Cold War era, nor are we on a decline. In fact, we are steadily growing, along with facing an even larger growth ahead of us with the Sentinel Project. We've spent the last 2 years working with Department of Defense, Northrop Grumman, and civic leaders throughout the city and county to help prepare for this national defense project. The ground-based strategic deterrent, now referred to as the Sentinel Missile Project, moving into the Panhandle region is an absolute. As written into the Air Force Environmental Impact Study, the location for the workforce housing hub will be located in Kimball, with construction planned for 2024. During the January 24th, 2023 public town hall meeting held in Kimball, hosted by the Air Force in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, the public was told that it was not a matter of if they were coming, but when they are coming. I've had the opportunity for personal discussions with colonels of the 90th Missile Wing who've advised us that we could not discuss the Northrop Grumman housing location details until the next step of a DoD contract was finalized. However, we at the city should look for a formal letter of intent by May of 2023. Air Force plans for shovels in the ground, quote unquote, summer 2023. As noted in the EIS, the short-term increases in population would exceed the historic annual average change. The construction activities would have significant beneficial effects on socioeconomics from increases in expenditures and employment. The Air Force and their contractors will be coordinating with local employment agencies to post opportunities with the goal of hiring a minimum of 20% of local workforce from the region of the Panhandle. These are workers spending wages on goods and services, resulting in beneficial effects on our local Nebraska businesses. Kimball has no choice but how we will brace for the impact and how we can manage this historic event for our population. The benefits and struggles facing Kimball will also overflow into our surrounding communities of Sidney, Gering, Scottsbluff, and smaller towns. We must ask ourselves, what do we want to accomplish? We have already been working towards capturing permanent sustainable growth, working with local businesses and partnering with engineers to set plans for building neighborhoods that will last decades beyond us. We are investing in our community with long-term planning, implementing infrastructure upgrades, annexing land, and working with developers to drastically increase our housing supply. And yet still, this does not meet the demand that we are facing. We have already expended significant resources with planned upgrades to our power generation plant and wastewater treatment plant. We've conducted multiple studies, including a housing needs study, an economic impact study specifically related to the Sentinel Project's impact on our community to determine the absolute best route moving forward. Along with these significant expenditures, the City of Kimball has been diligent to pay off bonds early, put reserves away in high interest accounts, and have saved our ARPA funds to prepare for the projects that need to be completed to meet the demands of the Sentinel Project moving forward into our area. These funds we are requesting will be used for emergency response essentials such as increasing law enforcement and allowing our current all-volunteer fire department to have the necessary equipment and permanent staffing required for timely life-saving response, along with a long list of necessary community improvements needed to sustain such growth. Most of the local funds will come from community working with developers and utilizing federal grant opportunities. However, with all that we've done to prepare, the truth is that we are just too small to tackle it all on our own. We need additional help to match the funds necessary to complete these projects. We need assistance to help in other places besides infrastructure. We need to be able to support our local small businesses and help them prepare for the growth that they too will be experiencing through added economic development funds. We need to expand and strengthen our childcare in our town and continue to find ways to support the demand for rural workforce housing so that we can keep our employees and families in Nebraska long after the Sentinel project is completed. All these pieces play a pivotal role in the breadth and scope of growing our community. We are not here asking for a handout. We're here asking for a partner. Is $26 million for region a lot to ask for? When faced with an historic $86 billion national defense project moving into the state of Nebraska, I politely say to you, no, it is not. This is a small investment by the state to ensure that we turn a 10-year project into a 100-year multi-generational positive impact for the Panhandle region, all while supporting our national defense program and our armed forces personnel. I thank you for your time. I have also handed out a very small condensed version of the Air Force's economic impact study in draft in a small form. It's 1,800 pages, so I didn't want to give it all. So I am open to any questions you may have.
We appreciate you not giving us the 1,800-page version of this.
I read it, so you're welcome.
Okay. All right, so we take a look on page S2. This is the diagram that shows basically the middle of the United States. Shows the missile fields at Monstrom, Minot, and F.E. Warren. If we take a look at the Nebraska notch, Kimball sits right in the middle of the dots roughly.
That is correct.
All right.
And on the very last, second to last page is a much better map, albeit a little small, of the actual Panhandle's impact with the missile locations. And on the final page is the notional housing hub.
Oh, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, questions? Burnett. Senator Lowe.
Thank you. Yeah, we're putting an E clause on LB 712 because the money needs to start flowing as soon as possible. Are there people on the ground already in Kimball moving things around and preparing for what's going to happen later this year?
On the ground, as far as the defense side of it?
On the ground as far as building and getting in preparation for it.
We've already started seeing growth. We've broke ground on a second grocery store this week. We've had several retail companies move into town as well. And we've got 3 different housing developments that we're working through with developers right now. So we're already starting to see an influx. To say the military's in town, military's always in our town. They're always moving through, so they're sort of partners with us already. We are expecting to start feeling an impact summer 2023. So we are trying to get moving as fast as we can. One of the issues with the emergency of it is we are going to have to put some things in place. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, things take a long time. I mean, we're looking at some electrical components for our upgrades to our power generation that are 50 weeks out. I mean, that's a lot of time. So that's another portion of it is just that global supply and knowing that we have to have that forethought now because things are going to take a little bit longer.
Kimball, Western Nebraska. We always hear Western Nebraska communities are growing smaller. Are you seeing that in Kimball?
No, we are not. That is exactly what I'm talking about. We had a brand new Ace Hardware build. We've had 2 other retail stores that are opening. And again, today we open up our second grocery store. That sounds crazy, but that's a big deal in town. We are working really hard to get some economic development funds to a proper daycare in town. Currently, we have 3 small daycares that are at home. They only house 8 children, and that is not enough even for where we are now. We have businesses outside of town that are also growing and expanding and doubling in size, and that in itself is putting some pressure on us. So we are actually steadily growing, and we're actually happy about that. So
Can you talk about that business that's south of town?
I could if you'd like me to. South of town is Clean Harbors Environmental Services. They are a $4 billion nationwide company. They have decided after all of their locations within the United States to make Kimball their nationwide hub. They are doing a $200 million expansion that will bring in over 200 employees alone, just employees. They're expecting 70 of those by fall of this year. They're also spending money and investing in housing in our town at the corporate level to help the city. They're big proponents of the town of Kimball. They chose us because of all the other towns that they have businesses in. We are friendly, and the state of Nebraska has always been great to them. So that business alone is putting some pressure on us as well, but it's exciting. And along with that, we are going to see in 2024, they're putting in a rail spur as well to help with that nationwide hub. So exciting things happening. And again, that's not just going to affect Kimball. It's in Kimball, but it'll affect Sidney, Gering, Baird, Morrill, all of the towns surrounding it, Scottsbluff. So it's actually great because several of those employees actually come from those communities into ours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Aren't you also building a new hospital?
We are building a new hospital, $42 million hospital with a helipad. It is set to open October 2023. So good. Thank you for noting that. I appreciate that.
No problem. Senator Hunt, did you have a question?
Thank you. I have some questions, and I hope I don't see too many eyes rolling because these might be really ignorant, normal civilian type questions. But this notional workforce hub, the plan of the workforce hub for this project, what happens to this after the completion of the project?
So that'll be a decision of what they call the stakeholders, the city and or, property owners on that land. We will have a decision when the letter of intent comes out and we actually sit down and have those conversations. Our decision will be, do we have them build it and then tear it all down and turn it back to grassland? Or would we like to keep it and turn it into something? Obviously, we're not going to have it go back to grassland. It could be could turn into something just fabulous. It could be, a college campus on the west side of town. It could be housing. It could be a training facility. It could be so many things. So those are decisions that we're going to have to make in the near future, but we don't have those answers just yet. But I can tell you from the city standpoint, we will not let go of something that could be great for growth in the future.
Okay. And then I'll also pose the question to you. It's a similar question to something Senator Conrad asked. If Nebraska and Kimball doesn't have the infrastructure currently, and I'm looking at this other handout talking about public safety, the need for police officers, and fire operators, water, wastewater, electric, roads and trails, public transportation, recreation, childcare, economic development. If these resources aren't enough for what is needed for this project, why is the federal government pursuing this project? Like, what if the bill doesn't pass? What are they going to do if there aren't enough public safety officers and things like that?
I don't think it's going to stop the federal government. The federal government, Department of Defense, they have their mission and they have their location. It's us asking for help as we grow, because let's be honest, we don't know what kind of ancillary services are coming with this. When a aerospace type industry moves into a town, you've got all kinds of different growth opportunities and businesses that follow with them. So what we're trying to do is brace for that extra impact. The different housing units that are going to come along, the different businesses that are going to come into town and say, hey, we want to be part of this as well. Where do we put them? How fast can we build that infrastructure to expand where we need to expand to?
Okay, thank you.
That answered your question.
Okay, Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Ms. Brower. Could you talk a little bit about this handout that was from the town hall meeting? And they talk on the last page, they talk about the DCIP project life cycle. Could you talk a little bit about that and where?
So you're talking about the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program? the very last page.
It's this handout,
Mhm.
the last page. Yes.
So this is one of the new programs that's available. It's something that we are working on already. I've had contacts with F.E. Warren Air Force Base and at the Capitol. And this is a program that will help assist military communities or communities affected by military move-ins to help with these kind of projects. So I just wanted to let the committee know that we are looking at all options of revenue sources. So we will also be reaching out to it's called the old CC, and going for this grant as well. So we are going to do everything that we can to try and get funds in. As any grant comes along, you're going to have matching funds as well. So that's another thing that we're concerned about, is making sure that we just have enough for those matching funds. So when we go for those grants, that we can complete these projects as planned.
So this handout is for a different funding source.
This handout was actually given out in one of our public town hall meetings. Part of it is what the Air Force itself presented to our local public and our local community. And I just wanted you to see that. So you can see in there where those locations are, and that the housing hub is planned for Kimball, Nebraska, up to 3,000 employees, and several staging areas, which also include City, Nebraska.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any additional questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Next proponent for LB 712. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Name's Gabe Ingram, GABEINGRAM. I am the City of Kimball City Council President here on behalf of our Mayor, John Morrison, who is not able to attend. We are in complete support of LB 712 and offer our unconditional support. The Air Force and the City of Kimball have long been partners and have a good relationship. This dates back to the 1960s and 70s, is what's been spoken before, where Boeing came in and put in the Minuteman III, and now after 60 years, it's time to retire that and bring in the Sentinel project, which will help boost our national security right in our backyard. As what's been said before, $86 billion is quite a bit, and in today's day and age, national security is huge, and things can change at any moment. With that being said, back in the 1960s, 1970s, Kimball was around, I believe, 7,000 people. So we've experienced this before, and there are members of our community who were around at that point and know the challenges that we faced back then, and are still around here today and welcome this project coming to our community. As what's been said before, 3,700 people, 10 years. We've been working in concert with the county commissioners, the school, and everybody to make sure that this project goes off as smooth as possible within our community. With that being said, we've looked at already revising our zoning, planning, infrastructure needs, is what Mrs. Brewer has mentioned before, with wastewater and power plant upgrades. We also know that with additional people, it will require more investment in the public safety sector. The Air Force, when, if something happens, they expect us to be out there and respond ASAP. And that's what part of this ask is for, as you've seen in your packets. We can't do this alone. We're asking for a partnership with the state. This is going to be a lot of sales tax dollars come back into our state coffers. This is a significant project, and the demands can't just be met by the City of Kimball. We ask that you be our partner in helping us get this funding here. we're ready to respond to this challenge, and we ask, like I said, that the state helps us out. Let's see here. We're proud to support the United States of America, our military, and the contractors that are working on this project in conjunction with the Air Force to bring this all to completion over the next 10 years. In summation, I ask for your support of LB 712 and our national security for this project as it lays down the foundation to bring our national defense to the next level as the arms race always is ever increasing. With that being said, I'd open to any questions you guys might have.
All right. Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions for you. Senator Rabel.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. I was a former city council person too, so the question I pose to you is, so how large is Kimball's current work, police enforcement?
Police force, we have chief and 4 officers, I believe that's correct, right? Yep. We have chief, 4 officers, and then sheriff's department as well. They work in conjunction with one another, and as all small municipalities and counties must.
Do you have any vacancies or openings right now?
Yes, on the sheriff's department side, we do. I believe we have 2, 3. We have 3 right now. Right now, we just hired 2 new police officers, and we'll be sending them to academy here shortly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, additional questions? All right, thank you for your testimony. Next proponent. Welcome to the government committee.
Before I get started, I wear hearing aids and sometimes I have a hard time understanding, so I might be screwing with my phone and I'm not texting. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Carl Stander, C-A-R-L, Stander, S-T-A-N-D-E-R. I'm a Kimball County Commissioner. The U.S. Air Force has been a great neighbor for over 50 years to the Kimball County. I was in high school when they first came in and built Minuteman missiles. So I am greatly aware of the impact that it will have on the county. It will impact our law enforcement, our emergency services, our county roads, and it will put an extra workload even inside our county courthouse. No, I lost my, okay. The U.S. Air Force is giving us an opportunity to upgrade our infrastructure, to strengthen our school systems, to create new jobs, to build new affordable housing, to support our local small business, and to attract new small business to the area. This project is so important not only to the panhandle of Nebraska, but the state of Nebraska and our great nation. We cannot afford to mess this up. Although this, with the population growth, it will impact the county, but the real burden is in the city of Kimball. The Kimball County Commissioners strongly support this military project, and we strongly support the hub of the workforce to be within inside the city limits of Kimball. The Kimball County Commissioners stand side by side with our city leaders. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Questions for Carl. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Stander, for being here. And you being on the county board most of these missile silos aren't on paved access, are they?
I'm sorry, say that.
Most of these missile sites they're not on paved access. They're not on a highway or a paved street.
Missiles? Yeah.
So what does that do to your country roads?
Okay. You're right. The missiles aren't all on the highways. They're scattered all over. They're currently, the system is set up that we call them missile roads. And back when they put these missiles in, they've designated certain roads that when they transport missiles to the site, they use these specific roads. Those roads are have better base. They're wider, better maintained. In the Air Force currently not cost share, but they help maintain those roads. They put gravel on them. We're actually the ones that maintain them, but they help keep them up. When you bring in over 3,000 workers, that's a lot of people going out to these sites on a daily basis. So these roads will get, even the better county roads will get tore up. So there'll be some extra maintenance and possibly more county expense for maintainers and to keep these gravel roads up.
Thank you.
All right, additional questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next proponent, LB 712. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Christy Warner, CHRISTYWARNER, and I have a unique perspective. I am first a 16-year military wife. I also am the Kimball County's Public Transit Administrator, and I sit on the City Council. Along with most communities in rural Nebraska, the City of Kimball has suffered a decline over the last 40 years, causing us to tighten our belts along the way. But times are changing, and we must adjust and refocus on what it takes to grow a community. I've spent the last 5 years embracing innovative ways to use public transportation to address critical needs in our communities. We've seen success. We're giving our elderly population the opportunity to stay in their homes by taking them to Scottsbluff and Sydney for appointments. We support our working parents by taking their preschoolers out of county and out of state to reach their childhood education due to not having the availability in Kimball. We assist the local businesses in transporting workers into the community who cannot find local housing. And I'm the only Panhandle Transit agency to cross into the Wyoming and Colorado borders, making this regional connection between the villages and cities just to meet the most human basic needs. This has led the transit to see a significant increase with a mere 7,000 boardings 5 years ago to looking at 30,000 boardings this fiscal year, traveling over 1 million miles and bringing $4 million federal dollars back into Kimball alone. That's before the Sentinel project. Now you may be asking yourself, what does public transportation have to do with nuclear missiles? Imagine reading the 1,800 pages of the full EIS to see a housing hub with 3,000 living spaces and only 600 parking spaces. This indicates there is no intention for every worker to have their own vehicle. Other than a cafeteria and a convenience store to pick up a soda, a quick bite to eat, those workers are going to need rides to restaurants, grocery stores, and recreation. We're already in the process of a massive expansion of public transportation just to keep our current services running efficiently in our communities. We have access to federal dollars, but need matching funds to put the necessary infrastructure to take on the extra 3,000 people between Sydney and Scottsbluff to access major retailers, specialty healthcare, and regional airports. We already see a Denver International Airport shuttle growing by leaps and bounds. I can only imagine what that looks like with the increased population. The Sentinel project is both an exciting time and a huge challenge for the people of our area. We're on the brink of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to inject the community and the region with the largest social economic progression we've seen in over half a century. This is not just about the housing hub. It's about all the additional workers that more than double our population of Kimball. And the additional people can bring small business opportunities and quality of life options to the region, which attract permanent residents. The region cannot take this huge influx on alone. We need funding for growth that will impact the surrounding villages and the neighboring cities for generations. LB 712 provides a way to match several grants and nearly $24 million in federal funds, allowing us to provide basic infrastructure to bring new worker housing throughout the Panhandle region, which grows the tax bases. It allows for our children to be close to home with daycares running locally. And it allows for a work-life balance with local recreation such as wellness centers for all age groups. We need to have transportation easily accessible to all, coordinating stops and building transfer stations to move the volumes of people daily. These benefits allow ancillary services to move into the area and not only support that $86 billion project, but the people that are imported from the Front Range of Colorado and Wyoming and across the nation to stay long after the 10-year project leaves. And yes, it is happening. We're already experiencing the new grocery stores, the 2 retail centers, and a Japanese restaurant. The houses that once sat empty for years are sold in days. We cannot do it alone, and we cannot tax enough to meet this growth. We are reversing the trend and need your support. Building partnerships throughout the region and the state is the way to make this an optimal win-win solution for not only Kimball, the Panhandle, the state of Nebraska, and showing the rest of the world as they watch this project take place that Nebraska is the good life. And I will take any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions? Question, Senator Lowe.
The airport that's south of town, is it going to be improved at all? Do you know?
I
Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more flights coming in. And
Sure, absolutely. So our local airport already does service some of the Air Force with fuel. They do have a project scheduled. It started a little late to do the runway. And after that, I don't want to speak just because I'm not aware of the future projects of that particular small airport. We also have the Sydney airport that helps handle that in the region. And then most people, we're taking them to Denver.
okay, thank you.
And just kind of FYI, there is an air wing out of Warren that is a helicopter wing that's dedicated to the security on the silos. And so they utilize the airport quite a little too, because that's the quick, easy way to get to where they need to be with missile silos that are in the middle of western Nebraska.
That's correct.
I almost said nowhere, but I'm from there. Okay, more questions? All right, thank you for your testimony. All right, next proponent. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. My name is David Scott, D-A-V-I-D-S-C-O-T-T, and I'm the current city manager of the city of Sidney, Nebraska. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be here today and testify as a proponent for LB 712 and talk a little bit about our city and how we come into play in this situation. As you know, in 2017, I guess most of you probably are aware that Bass Pro had bought out Cabela's and began moving their headquarters from Sidney, Nebraska to Springfield, Missouri. At that time, many people thought Nebraska or that Sidney would shrivel up and would no longer be there. Well, I'm here to tell you that rumors of our demise were greatly exaggerated. Here we are in just 5 short years, stronger and better and more diversified than ever before. Sidney now has the same problem that every other community has, including Kimball. We need employees and we need houses for them to live in. Where at one point 5 years ago, we had over 200 homes on the market. Today, or at least the day before I left to come here, it was only 23. So Sidney has the same problem, and we got there by relentless recruiting of businesses, and also obviously we had the skilled talent that people wanted, so we were able to recruit those businesses to come and set up shop there. The Sidney is very resilient. And the reason I bring a lot of this up is one of the things that we can do to help. Before Cabela's left, Sidney had 3 housing districts that we were putting together, or 3 subdivisions that can have over 160 lots, with most of the infrastructure in place now. So we stand ready to help. And we know our partners in Kimball are grateful for that. We had a housing study done. It was just 2 years ago, in 2021, that showed that Sidney on its own would need 219 houses, either single or multiple family homes, in the next 5 years. So we know that this is going to be an even greater need now. And we do stand ready to help. We just needed a little a little assistance from LB 712 to get those lots prepared and ready to go. We've already done most of the work. Another thing I'd like to mention is, I don't know if you've been through Sydney, but our exit 59 off I-80 is kind of a famous spot there. We have everything. It's like a city up there. We have 2 major truck stops. We have trucking businesses. We have 8 hotels that can house over 500 travelers. We have restaurants, dentist's office, doctor facility. We have everything up there. It's like I said, it's like a small city up there. But the one thing we didn't do when we were planning that is we didn't plan for the how people would communicate or move between all those different facilities. So 2 years ago, Sydney hired RDG out of Omaha to do a design and give us cost estimates to improve that. Because quite honestly, it's a safety hazard. We have people, truckers and families that are crossing 5 lanes of street, just running across them. We need to do better and prepare that and make it a more beautiful entrance to Nebraska that people can be proud of. We did do that study and we did get cost estimates for that. We have been applying for grants ever since then to try to get that project done. Sydney is one of only 8 cities in Nebraska that were awarded money from the Safe Streets for All program, which is out of the infrastructure package. We were awarded $300,000, but that is to do a study on our entire city and not just the East Old Post Road corridor off of I-80, where we know that the business is going to pick up exponentially because we do have those facilities up there. What we're wanting to do now is maybe partner with the state and LB through LB 712 to maybe get some matching funds to move forward quicker on that project and at least get that portion of it done. We feel both these things, both the housing that will be needed in the area will be sustained long-term because our housing study tells us that, right? Tells us that we need alone without this project more than what we have already. And then we also think that the improvements to that interstate exchange will also provide a wonderful beacon to the other 3 states that border us on that side of Nebraska coming through, and we'll see something that they can be proud of. Like, wow, this is really great. We can walk to this restaurant and walk to this hotel and we can go get a checkup if we want. And it's all very safe. And Nebraska is a fantastic place. Look how beautiful it is. I want to be here, you know? And so with that said, I guess I don't have any other items to talk on other than I would be more than happy to take questions on anything that has to do with Sydney and how this project would affect us.
All right, thank you. Let's see if any questions. Questions? All right. Oh, Senator Lowe.
What's the distance between city and Kimball, or between Sydney and Kimball?
I think it's about 35 miles, is that right? 35, 40 miles? Yeah. We're very close.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, next proponent. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, members of the Government, Military, and Veteran Affairs Committee for having us here. My name is Angel Helms, ANGELHELMS. I'm a senior at Kimball High School. Before writing this, I talked amongst family members, friends, business owners, and school staff. I asked what they think would be the most detrimental factor when we almost double in size. Each said the same 2 things: capacity and appeal. At the current size, our town is sufficient. Sure, we could definitely use a Walmart and some more fast food, but about half of the residents in Kimball have been born and raised there and have been accustomed to this lifestyle. The lifestyle where any other food other than Pizza Hut and Subway is an hour away minimum. Any clothing store is the same distance. To emphasize that point, everyone I know, except for the older generation, will not buy any groceries or household items from in town unless it is truly urgent. People would rather drive an hour away for a roll of toilet paper and McDonald's than stay in town. Now, while cost is a part of this problem, another issue is the demand. The town has very little money to help meet the demand of people in Kimball. Shoes, shirts, or even a phone charger for less than $25 is almost mythical in this town. How are we supposed to convince the youth and others to stay in a town that is slowly dying? Now, perhaps that is over-exaggerating just a bit, but as someone who was born and raised in this town, there's not many reasons I would choose to stay. Even if I wanted to, where would I live? The current average wait time on just an apartment is 6 months to a year. Statistics show that there are 23 homes for sale and 19 places to rent in Kimball, and that is not including the ones that they're currently planning. The missile project isn't The Mizzle plan is anticipated to last a decade, and 10 years is a very large amount of time. If the people and families involved in this project decide to stay past that finished goal, they will need a place to stay. And I'm sorry, but we're anticipated to get 3,700 people for the military plan and 150 people for the Clean Harbors expansion. How in the world are we going to accommodate nearly 7,000 people when we can't even accommodate 2,000? So let's say that all gets fixed and we're able to build a few more homes and get a couple more businesses to help meet the community's needs. What about the appeal? Kimball is a cute town, but how many students have you met that would rather hang out in town rather than go home and watch TikTok? Personally, I used to be obsessed with the park and pool in Kimball, but recently I haven't seen anyone at either of these locations. Sadly, we have no workers at these locations that can make a difference simply because there's no money to spare for these projects. My hope is that with the passing of LB 712, Kimball will have the opportunity for kids' recreation, job opportunities, and perhaps another workout facility. The influx of people will be very helpful for morale and business in town, especially local businesses who are currently suffering. I'm very excited to see this journey take place in Kimball. I feel like the expansion and missile project will bring a lot of benefits and action to our quaint yet wonderful town. LB 712 is a bill that has the potential to ensure that there are opportunities for students like myself who may return, and those involved in these projects may stay. Thank you for your time. I hope you can vote this bill out of committee and see my perspective. You have the power to make a real difference in an entire panhandle, a change that can really last.
All right, thank you, Angel. Now, I'm assuming that you're one of Mrs. Ferguson's students?
Yes, I am.
Very good. You weren't forced to endure my speech a couple years ago, were you?
I was not. I was currently living in Sydney.
All right, any questions for Angel? Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Angel, for coming all this way and testifying. You are 17, 18 years old now?
I'm 18 years old.
18 years old now. Do you realize the next time that they revamp these missile silo sites, you will be Carl's age? Maybe we ought to do it sooner.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, next testifier. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you, Senator Brewer and members of the committee for being here today. I'm Hannah Schultauer, HANNAH-SCHILDHAUER, and I'm a senior at Kimball High School. First off, I'd like to thank Senator Brewer for coming and seeing us in our class and telling us his amazing story. It's nice to see you again. I've lived in Kimball, Nebraska my whole life. I grew up walking everywhere downtown and spent most of our summers at our community pool and parks. I've seen many families and people come to our community and either stay or leave. Don't get me wrong, this town is my forever home and I have so many amazing memories here, but I have seen our town and community go through various ups and downs due to lack of resources and money. I have seen many businesses flourish and continue to do so, but I have seen our local businesses struggle and slowly disappear. Once I knew we were getting this amazing opportunity to come and testify for this bill, I instantly knew to speak to my dad. My dad was raised in Kimball and decided to raise my brothers and I in Kimball as well. He was a founding member of starting a local chapter of Red Knights, which is a group of men who do things for our community with their own funding. He was a volunteer firefighter for around 10 years, and he now owns his own successful trucking company. As a trucker, he is everywhere every week. He drives through many small towns like Kimball and many huge ones like Lincoln. And it seems the biggest difference is parking availability close to the exits. Truck parking is very limited in Kimball, causing many people to just pass by. I feel that if we spent more effort and funds towards our visitors' point of view of Kimball, we could potentially grow just from that. Growth is possible within the smallest things, but with this huge 10-year missile project that will soon come to Kimball, it'll bring many workers as well as their families. One major issue I feel that Kimball faces is our schools. Our schools fit our population pretty snug already, and with the boom we are expecting, I feel we will not be able to effectively fit everyone in our current facility. Our high school could possibly afford some growth, not much, as we have extra classrooms, but our elementary is at capacity. I feel that if we put money towards upgrading and adding on to our current school, or deciding to just build another school in place of it, it would improve our educational capacities immensely. As well as our school, this bill would help tons with infrastructure. Without a solid structure, what can a town build off of? Even though our town is small, I feel that we are very compact and condensed. As a senior leaving for college soon, I would love to come back to my hometown and possibly be a teacher there. And I would personally just love to see us expand more than adding in what small space we already use. With great power comes great responsibility, and I feel that as people that hold such big power over Kimball and the town's future, accountability should be the biggest responsibility. In Section 2, subsection 1, it says the fund shall only be used pursuant to this section. Accountability for this generous amount of funding and the usage is critical. As residents of Kimball and the 48th District, we need to hold our leaders accountable for such power. I want to thank all of you for giving us your time and attention. I really hope you take our observations and opinions to heart. We truly love our town and hope that you consider helping us to keep us on the map. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. And to put things into perspective, when we would travel to Kimball from Gordon for sports, we look forward to going to Kimball, the big town. So anyway, let's see if we have questions for you. Any questions for Hannah? All right. Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier, proponent to LB 712. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Good afternoon, Government, Military, and Veteran Affairs Committee. My name is Madison Ebling, MADISONEBEELING. I'm from Kimball, Nebraska. I have lived in Kimball for 8 years. If I'm being honest, my first impression of Kimball was, wow, Mom, there are a lot of abandoned buildings here. I was kind of disappointed when I realized this is the town I'll be living in. At the time, I was 10 years old and I had just moved from Nevada. But then I realized many of my classmates have lived here all their lives and this is all they've known. So to them, the abandoned buildings and the bad roads are normal. I would hate for new community members and their families to think of our beloved town the same way I did when I first moved here. The town now has begun a 180, and we're turning these buildings into small businesses and restaurants. The people who live in Kimball are trying to make this town beautiful once again. This money could help us with building more houses and adding on to our elementary and high school and so much more. To tell you the truth, Kimball is growing. We need daycares and new community buildings. We have so many projects that have been unfinished or not even started due to the lack of money in this town. For example, the Kimball Information Center should be the highlight of this town, where new people and visitors can stop by and learn about Kimball. But instead, there are no owners and no business. If we were to get this money, we could replenish the Information Center and make it more than what it was. We could get a newer building and even add a bigger parking lot for truck drivers to stay overnight or whatever they need. My stepdad is a truck driver, and parking these huge semis and their loads are really tough. We have one parking lot for all of them to park, and most nights and weekends it's full. He has to drive all the way to Bushnell, Nebraska, which is 20 miles away from Kimball, to park his truck because the parking lot is full. My mom and I have to drive 20 miles there and back to pick him up just for him to leave the next morning. The round trip would be approximately 100 miles for my mom and I to pick him up and drop him off every week, which can cost quite a bit with constantly changing gas prices. If I'm worrying about it as someone with just my small Chevy, then I cannot imagine the stress that might be put on military vehicles when they're finding places to park while they're working. With the military project headed to Kimball, we do not have the resources to support these workers and their families. Kimball has a grand total of 23 houses currently available for a 10-year plan. How are we going to care over 3,700 new residents? With being involved in the Clean Harbors expansion, their goal is to build up to 25 additional houses. But not even this plan can go through without additional funding. Whether or not this bill passes, there will be double the amount of people moving to town. We have no way to support them. I really love this town, and so does everyone else in Kimball. Everyone wants to see this town succeed. I'm heading off to college to get an elementary education degree. and I would love to come back to Kimball to teach and start my family. But I can't do that if this town is overpopulated without housing or bigger schools. We are in desperate need for a bigger elementary school. We are already at our maximum limit, and with the boom we are expecting, there is absolutely no way we can fit any more elementary students. Just like the elementary, this little panhandle town and other surrounding towns need to be able to grow and flourish. But we can't do that without your help. I hope you can take the time to consider this bill and the impact you have on each of our lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madison. Okay, so we have any questions for you? Questions, Senator Hart?
Thanks for coming today, Madison. Did you guys drive all the way here?
We did.
You didn't take the helicopter this time?
Not this time, no.
Are you in college now or high school?
No, I am a high school student.
What are your plans after high school?
I plan to go to Hastings University and major in elementary education.
Very cool. Well, I wish you the best. And
Thank you.
You and your classmates did an amazing job, and I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Madison, for
Thank you.
testifying. Welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer and members of the committee. My name is Kira O'Brien, Kearaobrien. I am a senior at Kimball Senior High School and have lived in Kimball for the entirety of my life. Growing up in Kimball has left me with many memories, like riding my bike down to the pool or to the dollar store to get snacks, hanging out at my family's business, and annoying my grandpa while I show him I can count to 100. Celebrating Farmers Day with various activities such as the pancake feed, parade, and my personal favorite, the demolition derby, or even just hanging out at the annual fair. These experiences have really molded me into the person I am today. Kimball is a wonderful little town with some of the best people, but just passing through it, it looks like a ghost town. Many buildings are abandoned or condemned. Kimball has a lot of potential, we just need the funding. Growing up in Kimball, I have seen many of my friends and their families come and go due to better opportunities somewhere else. I've also experienced many local stores either thrive or fizzle out. Take my family's business, Monograms and More, for example. My grandpa's uncle, Bernie O'Brien, started the business as a laundry and dry cleaning back in 1953 during Kimball's major oil boom. A year later, he sold the business to my great-grandpa, John O'Brien, who owned and managed the store until 1973, when my grandpa, Jim O'Brien, took over. In the late 1990s, the business started to struggle until my dad, Robert O'Brien, introduced screen printing and embroidery. This helped the business stay afloat, but with large companies having cheaper prices, we slowly lost business and had to sell. In the early 1960s, Kimball saw its first big boom. My grandpa gave me newspapers from the Western Nebraska Observer that he had saved from this time period. Those articles said that between the first missile project and the discovery of oil in Kimball County, Kimball saw a growth of 27% in population during this time. History tends to repeat itself, and with the new missile project, as well as the growth of clean harbors, Kimball does not have the means to house an estimated 3,700 more people, or the 10% of permanent growth. Take our daycares and schools, for example. In the town of Kimball, there are only 2 daycares which are full. Many families send their young children to Pines Bluff, Wyoming, 23 miles away, for childcare. Our schools, elementary and high school, have amazing atmosphere and staff, but our schools don't have much room for growth. The elementary school is at the point where it is over capacity. Our 5th and 6th graders have to have class in a modular outside of the school. The Kimball High School, on the other hand, has many rooms that are vacant or being used for storage. In the high school, we could hold approximately 200 more students, but we are low-staffed and struggle holding teachers in their positions. Kimball acts as a stepping stone for many people, including teachers, medical professionals, and police. It's a good starting place for many people to get the experience in their profession and move on to something better. With the funding, our community could grow, ensuring people who want to make Kimball their forever home and the final step in their profession. As a senior, I have started thinking about my future and what it holds. I'm going to further my education at Hardin State College and plan to major in elementary education. I would like to come back to Kimball and give back to the community who helped raise me. But without this funding, I am unsure if there will be a Kimball to come home to. As Kevin Costner said in the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Thank you.
Nice ending there. All right. Questions for Kara? All right. Thank you for coming in and testifying.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ferguson, welcome to the Government Committee.
Thank you. Senator Brewer, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer and committee members. My name is Jerry Ferguson, Jeriferguson. And I grew up in the Panhandle of Nebraska for the first 16 years on a farm north of Potter. And then the summer before my junior year, my parents moved us into Kimball. During those 2 years in high school, I fell in love with Kimball. And my dream and goal was to come back to Kimball and teach. And by God's grace, that came true. I still love this town, even though it has gone from my class of 92 graduates to this year's graduating class of 23, or I hope. My oldest son chose teaching as his profession, and like every mother, I would love for him to become a teacher at Kimball Public Schools. As of now, that is not very likely because Kimball is not an attractive town for young people raising a family. As my students have said, our elementary school is old and outdated and crowded. Our swimming pool is outdated. There's no place to play basketball except some outdoor courts at the park. And in the wintertime, there's not much playing outdoors, especially this winter. Despite these difficulties, the town I love is fighting to improve things and some things to be proud of, like a strong teaching staff. And yes, I might be a little biased on this one. Solid administration and a superintendent and school board that are working hard to make long needed improvements. The transit system. If you have a chance to sit and visit one-on-one with Christy Warner, I agree, you should. She took an idea that people were literally rolling their eyes at around town, but she stuck with it, and it has become the role model. I truly believe we were the first town in the Panhandle to have this, and now you can't go to any small town without seeing similar vehicles, and I truly think she started it, and you should visit with her. It's amazing. Our multi-million-dollar hospital and clinic that is to open this year. Our largest employer, Clean Harbors, which people have already mentioned, is growing and is going to add the jobs. And along with the influx of workers everybody's talked about with the missile project. There are people in town in our community already interested in trying to build houses and apartments to accommodate this growth, but there's so much potential, and all we need is a little help to support our infrastructure, which LB 712 could provide. Now, I know people roll their eyes at my saying a little help because 26 million is not little. It is possible that some centers that are not from the Panhandle area or not knowing Kimball's situation might hesitate to support it. Well, to them, I would like to say, well, let's talk about LB 1024 that was passed during last year's session, the North Omaha Recovery Act, which went to help a specific area in Omaha. The ask of LB 1024 was $450 million. And if I understand reading, and that's a big if, understand reading fiscal notes, it ended up being $449 million. Now, I know this came from different income sources, but the precedent has kind of been set. And let us not forget the benefit Nebraska is going to get back from your investment in our community in your state sales tax and income tax. I believe the state will more than recoup this 26 million investment in the Panhandle and to my beloved Kimball. Please vote for LB 712 out of committee and help to get it through the main body. Thank you for your commitment to serve and let me share.
Thank you, Mrs. Ferguson. And I thank you for, one, being willing to bring the kids all the way across the state to testify. When I came out, I was very impressed, not only at the school and how organized and professional everything was, but how well your students were behaved. They were very respectful. And it was one of those trips that I was so glad I went out there for Veterans Day to be there for that, because you made Veterans Day special. So thank you. All right, questions for Ms. Ferguson? I have to say that because you're a teacher, and it just doesn't seem right if I don't show that. Just so you know, last year we also passed $55 million, which was for Offutt Air Force Base to help with non-military type projects, and mostly for quality of life things to help the base. So this isn't out of norm that we do in order to help that part of Nebraska that is utilizing the military or using the military. So, all right. Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, we're still looking at proponents to LB 712. All right. Now we'll go to any opponents to LB 712. And now I'll go to the next. Neutral. General, please come on up. Thank you for your patience.
Of course. Good afternoon, Chairman Brewer, members of the Government, Military, and Veteran Affairs Committee. I am Major General Daryl Bohack, Daryl Bohac, the Adjutant General of the Nebraska Military Department, here today to testify in a neutral position on LB 712. I'm not going to read all my testimony because it's repetitive to what's been said. I will say this: while I believe in and see the value of capitalizing on efforts to increase modernization, especially related to national security, I also believe that expenses related to the implementation of the ground-based strategic deterrent plan are best funded by the initiating entity, such as the Department of the Air Force. The Nebraska Military Department provided an indeterminate fiscal note because we do not have a clear understanding of what is expected of my office as the administrator of the fund. For example, the language does not provide a personnel appropriation to hire staff to manage the cash transferred into the fund, which means the military department would be obligated to reallocate already fully allocated personnel and fiscal resources to fulfill a financial obligation, which I think is important, created by the fund, by the establishment of the fund. Again, the program to modernize our ground-based missile defense system is critical to our national security and to our national defense strategy, which is a responsibility of the federal government. Thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, sir. So right now, let's suffice to say you've got your hands full. You got the Army Guard busy doing stuff all over the place. You got the Air Guard busy doing stuff all over the place. You got the military department you're trying to manage. And now we're wanting to add a little more to the plate. But with adding that to the plate, we're not giving you any resources. So everything is going to be a little more difficult if we don't include that.
That's correct.
I think it was an oversight that needs to be considered. If we could identify the personnel that would be needed to manage this as an amendment, would that be something? Because I think when they were thinking through this, so that who is best to handle it.
Sure.
And it really doesn't fit into the veterans realm and Health and Human Service. I mean, wherever you go, the only place that I think they thought it fit was with you, because quite frankly, you've got the knowledge and understanding the significance, the issues of clearances. And
right.
So, and I haven't talked to the sponsor of the bill, but I think if I'm tracking this right, if we can figure out how to do that, so it doesn't put a burden on the stuff we're already trying to keep in the air, that would be reasonable.
Yes, Senator, I think it would be. I mean, in addition to all that you mentioned, I'm also responsible for emergency management for the state of Nebraska. And this legislature has entrusted us with all the virus relief funds, emergency rental assistance funds, homeowners assistance funds, and ARPA funding is flowing through my agency as well. So that additive burden is a bit more than we could take on, I think, even over a 10-year program for 26 million. So some additional help and structure. And then I think this would be in partnership with the good folks from Kimball and Sydney and the region about what are the expectations. I think I was sitting here reading a note from the Auditor of Public Accounts because I have some exit briefings coming. We will be held accountable for all these funds, not anyone else. And we'll have to provide all the documentation and supporting evidence that the funds were appropriately administered. And that's what I'm asking, or that's what I'm highlighting here.
Oh, I can see how that would get one's attention.
It does get one's attention.
All right, questions for General Boyd? Senator Lowe.
Thank you, General, for being here. And are any of these programs sunsetting anytime soon that you're now managing so that?
Some will phase out, Senator Lowe. That's certainly true. The ARPA funds will be around for several more years, I think 3 to 5 more years in terms of the federal funds that have flowed into the state and that were appropriated through the legislature. Coronavirus relief funds have largely ended. We're closing out the emergency rental assistance program, and then homeowners assistance should be around for another year. But I'll just offer this. So if we have another epic flood like we had in 2019 with somewhere in the neighborhood of $580 million worth of damages that we support the recovery process for, that, those things come and go. So I just want to be responsible about that part too. Thank you.
I understand.
Yeah.
So probably more than likely you would have to have a dedicated team or whatever you want to call it that would be focused pretty much on this full time. That would kind of be their mission in life because it's really not a part-time task to manage.
No, sir, I think that's correct, Senator. And I think we would want to work to scope that appropriately. Right.
Yes, Senator Rabel.
Major General, thank you so much. I think you're trying to tactfully say in your remarks that it's customary. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, customary and normal for the initiating entities to fund the infrastructure improvements required to handle the capacity of a project like this?
Well, I don't have the advantage that the good folks of Kimball have had in the discussions with the 90th wing out of F.E. Warren. So that is their natural partner. So, but I would say that one, the missile silos aren't moving. That's not the project. The project is to improve the missile silos and the launch facilities and the structures around them. Yes, that's going to require workforce, but that seems to me to be a responsibility of the federal government to facilitate, right? But clearly listening to the testimony, which is very informative for me as well today, it seems that they've expressed an expectation that there will be a partnership through matching funds.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for the general? All right, sir. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, Ernie, welcome to the Government Committee. I always enjoy reading your wisdom.
Thank you, Senator Brewer, and thank you to members of the committee. Thanks for allowing me to testify today. And I'll be testifying on a study that I did. My name is Ernie Goss, CRNIEGOSS. And I'll be testifying on the study that I did examining the impact of this environmental in the Air Force Global Strike Command Environmental Impact Statement. Now, I have to say, I come at this with a little bit of bias. I'm an ex-military, and I was involved in a few deployments myself. Nothing as large as this, I might add, but this is obviously a large impact. And I first want to say that Nebraska, and everyone here understands clearly, that Nebraska suffers from brain drain, we call it. Over the last 5 years, only 6 states in the District of Columbia have lost more to brain drain than Nebraska. So this program, I would argue, supports brain gain rather than drain. And for those of us who live in the metropolitan areas, we hopefully understand clearly the pressures this put on the rural areas of the state and small town Nebraska. So this program is supportive of small town in rural Nebraska. And I want to say also that Cheyenne, Wyoming is only 58 minutes from Kimball. So in terms of impacts, in terms of those who can drive in, and 58 minutes is not a long commute for Nebraskans. And I'm sure those of us here from Omaha can attest to that. We're here in Lincoln, of course. So the population gain that we estimate, my team and I, is about 12% permanent, about 12.5% permanent population gain after the military has left. And that's the deployment, the first 5 years, and then later on, the population gain and 112 jobs with that. Now that's assuming the $26 million from the state of Nebraska to support the deployment. Now, absent that, there will be some cost, and you'll not get those impacts. And economic development parlance, all of you have heard the term "but for." But for this revenue, what would happen? But that's what we're showing here. But in this case, what would happen with the $26 million? And our estimate is about $1.29 for every dollar that the state of Nebraska invests. And as testified before, a lot of money is being spent across the state of Nebraska. And as I'm a resident of Omaha, and I think, again, we have to support, I think we have an obligation to support the entire state of Nebraska. And it's particularly, again, focusing on brain drain, and that's is coming from the non-metropolitan areas. And as testified to the students that talked, and earlier individuals that talked about what's happening to individuals and that graduate from our universities, our colleges, our high schools. What I would like to see them stay, and we heard that from the students, that we need to provide a more of an environment, a more livable place, and that's what the study examined is. What about the livable place? What about the physical costs? What about the revenues? Now, we looked at it from the state revenues. In other words, that's income tax, of course, income taxes, and state sales taxes. We did not look at it from the impact of the local taxes that are collected, for example, in terms of property tax. But as all of you know, there's a significant stress in non-metropolitan areas of this state in terms of support for schools and others. And I think this goes a long way toward that, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. Hopefully you have a copy of our study, which I'd like to thank the folks at Kimball for providing data that came. The data initially came from the Air Force, of course, and then we put this through what's called an in-plan model. So we modeled the impact using I think a widely acceptable model. So I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have. Yes.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Questions for Ernie? Yes, Senator Rabel.
Yes, thank you, Professor Goss. So the question on your analysis and study, was it focused exclusively on the funding of the $26 million, or did you take into account some of the other funding sources? I know that in one of the handouts, there's a number of grant programs that they're all trying to collaborate with, like the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program, City General Obligation Bonds, and Rural 5 District. That's just on the public safety side. There's, a really impressive list of projects and programming and partnerships and grant funding and a collaboration, which is really commendable. But since I haven't had a chance to dig into your studies, is that all those additional funding sources factored in here as well, or was it just focused on the general funds commitment from the states?
Senator, no, they're not. Our team focused on the $26 million. And of course, we made the assumption that it would be funded. Now, obviously, that's in your hands, not mine. So, no, it did not consider those.
Thank you.
All right, Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chairman Brewer. Professor Goss, if the legislature doesn't pass LB 712 and this funding is not injected into the community from the legislature, but perhaps they do receive federal funding, in this exhibit, they were talking about lots of local funding, federal funding, grant funding, different things. Could the positive outcomes outlined in your study still come to fruition if the funding is coming from a different source?
Those impacts of $26 million, it's the term used, the term we call fungible. It's a federal dollar versus a state dollar versus a local dollar. If those dollars come from other sources, we would see those impacts as well. And we looked at commute patterns, for example, from Sydney to Kimball and from others. And as was Mr. Scott testified before in terms of Sydney's impact. And we saw what happened when Cabela's left Sydney. And I, for one, did not expect the positive outcomes that did happen there, but they have been positive. But this would be, you would have individuals, if there is no funding, in other words, the but for condition, I hate to use that term, but that's what economic development folks use, but for that. Now, in other words, if you get federal monies that support, they would obviously have the same positive impacts, assuming there are no strings attached to that funding.
So, given that, as other testifiers have said, the feds are coming in to do this project, whether we give them the cherry on top of the state funding or not, they're coming in to do the project. So, but this study that we're looking at from you is only analyzing state funding, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How do you think that affects the validity of this study for the impact of the project, writ large?
The project at large, as I understand it, would go forward irrespective of the funding. The question is, what happens once once the construction's over? And that's my concern, not just as an economist, but as a citizen of the state of Nebraska. What happens then? That's the real concern. And that would be absent that, there wouldn't be the 112 jobs. Okay, we're talking about 112 jobs, about 12.5% growth in population. And that's if the upon exiting the military exits, and I don't know if you've been part of when the military exits, it's a very painful process. I mean, it's a painful process. When I exited in my military days, now I was not there to see what happened after we left, but it's not always a pretty picture. And unfortunately, the states in many cases are left with the cost of that. And not to get off the topic, I've already gone off too much of the topic, but state funding for education is another big issue. And as all of you know, that's been, in my judgment, discriminatory to certain parts of the state. And this would help offset some of that. And I'm off topic here, I realize.
Sure. So in this plan that was handed out to us for spending, it looks like it's expecting 24 million federal dollars. And so if the state did not pass this bill, but the $24 million came from the federal government, some of the findings of your study could still hold, correct? You're talking about the 112 jobs, and of course, all this just being an educated guess, but that could still.
We call it a projection.
Yeah, familiar. Thank you very much.
No.
Sorry.
Correct. You are absolutely correct. Thank you. Sorry for
Thank you.
interrupting.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Professor Goss, I was just thinking, Major General brought up a really good point, and I think Senator Hunt was kind of honing in on federal dollars, an expectation of federal dollars, and I don't know if it's something that you factored in. I know that Major General mentioned some of the initiating entities, like the Air Force. It's their project, it's their silos, it's their missiles. I don't know if you were aware, were they planning on injecting a certain amount of funds to help the community? Or maybe that might be a question for Ms. Browers or certainly Senator Hardin to answer.
Well, thank you, Senator. And I had the this is all based on is the Air Force Global Strike Command environmental impact statement. To the degree that they factored that in, we factored it in. To the fact that it was outside, we did not examine that. And the military and the federal government has not asked me to testify to anyone. I don't know what the intent from the federal government is, but I'm always concerned about the vicissitudes or what comes from the federal government, what they give us, they can take us away. And so, but again, we did not, only to the extent it was in the environmental impact statement from the Air Force. That's the 26 million was over and above that. So we examined the impact of that.
Okay, thank you.
And did you read that the federal money was matching money, so that if we didn't put up the money, there wouldn't be any way to match the money? So that therein lies the challenge.
Right, correct.
And on your issue of when the military ceases to use a facility, in many cases, it's simply handed over to, in the case of Germany, it was normally handed over to the government, then the government then decided what to do with it, how to do it, but they're more than happy to, once they're done with the hot potato, let it go, especially if it needs a lot of maintenance or anything like this. So yeah, sometimes that transition can be challenging. I don't know, looking at the design on this facility there, the housing might be something that they look at moving or doing something else with. I don't know. The main facility looks like that probably is permanent infrastructure that would be relatively new if it's just a decade that it's used. But as we all know, the best of plans with the military tends to always be a lot longer than we thought. So it might be an old building by the time they get done. Who knows?
Absolutely. Sorry, Senator. We assumed beginning in 2023, we examined it through the year 2033. So that's the period we looked at. But obviously, the impacts go far beyond that, assuming that we as Nebraskans or Nebraska and the citizens in that area provide a conducive place to live. And that's, again, as Mr. Scott and as David Scott said earlier, and Annette Brower as well. This is very important, and I guess I'm sounding like I'm not neutral on it. I'm positive, but I am trying to be as neutral as I can.
Sure. Well, and what we're doing is putting another town besides the town that's there, and have to do. How do you have streets? How do you have sewer? How do you have water? How do you have electricity? How do you have all of this for this new town that doesn't exist now and wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this project? And so trying to figure out what right looks like that is our challenge.
Yeah, Senator Brewer, and the question was asked earlier, what if it's not? What happens if it's the burden of the citizens of the county and the city and the area? Well, it's bond issue. That's typically how it's done. And we all know how that figures into your property taxes and other taxes, local option sales taxes as well. So there would have to be some bond issuance in my judgment. Now, we did not look at that issue. If there's not funding, would it be bond issuance? And I'm just as I sit here, I don't know for certain, but it's very likely there would be bond issuance, and that burden would fall on the property taxpayers in the county and city.
And the challenge with that, of course, is that it was the United States government made the decision to build the silos where they built them. You're going to put the burden of that national security on the backs of a small town in western Nebraska, and it may be more than they can bear. I mean, that could be the reality of our situation. Okay, questions for Professor Gus? Thank you, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Okay, we are still on neutral testifiers on LB 712. All right, seeing none, we will invite Senator Hardin to come up and give us a close. We do have letters to read in. 2 proponents, 1 opponent, no one in the neutral. Sir Hardin, welcome back.
Thank you. some of the colonels welcomed me when I arrived at Ellsworth Air Force Base. They said, what's it like to be on the front end of a $1 trillion expenditure over the next several years? That's what we have going on. It's not just what's going on in Banner and Kimball counties, but there's an enormous amount of investment in the security of our country going into it. And when they put it in that way, it kind of opens your eyes. I would love for the federal government to pay for this and for this to be an irrelevant discussion. That'd be awesome. So far, they haven't stepped up. As we've just talked about, in a nutshell, even if and when they do step up, it's going to be predicated upon the notion that those are matching dollars that have to take place. And so we need to be prepared, and that's why we're having this discussion. It's obviously a once in a lifetime kind of experience for people involved with it. It's also, and I kind of chuckle because if some of the members of the committee take exception with $26 million, there was no such exception taken regarding a conversation about Omaha and $150 million just 2 days ago. So I look at this and say, this is a once in a lifetime experience and the country needs it. It's coming our way. And so we would really like for our community to be protected before, during, and after this happens. And that's what this request is about.
Okay, we've got questions. Senator Rabel.
So Senator Hardin, thank you. And I think what we're just trying to do is clarify all the sources that are involved and that should be involved. I think Major General brought up the idea that probably the Air Force should be part of it. And I really appreciate this because it does break it down to each of the important components of being able to handle this new infrastructure that will be happening very soon. But it does seem like that there's a number of programs that have been outlined that there is matching funds from the Department of Defense with their program, the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program. And I know on some of the literature, it made it pretty clear the projects must be construction ready. All of their funding must be secured, which would probably help with our general funds. But the DCIP funding must be the last in to allow the community to complete the project. And I think all the administrators from Kimball are incredibly resourceful and are on top of this. So I think it's important that, I don't know if you can explain a little bit clearer that there are other funding sources that are going to be partnering. And it does sound like Kimball is going to have to take out some general obligation bonds for part of this, and the rural fire district will be involved. And of course, I know that Ms. Warner talked about the transportation system, and federal transit dollars are involved along with Kimball. So it's a whole cast of characters, but I know that the money coming from the state would be incredibly helpful. But I guess I go back. The missiles and the silos, they belong to the federal government, correct?
They do not belong to the people of Kimball.
Okay.
They're coming.
And then, so I guess it goes without saying that if they didn't do this upgrade, where would that leave us? And if they are doing the upgrade, it's something that they're initiating. Is that correct?
Of course, the federal government is initiating the military project. And I think when we ask the question, where does that leave us? It leaves the community devastated.
Mm-hmm.
We have, as they said, 4 police officers. All 4 of them for a group of people, that requires many, many more than that. So whether you're looking at that or the effect on any of the pieces of a community that we outlined today, it's all found lacking. And so at the end of the day, we're asking the basic question, how do you survive this? And then on that continuum, is there a way to prevail in this? And the problem is, even survival doesn't happen in a community if we don't get help. The easy thing, I think, for anyone who doesn't live there is to say, go bond your way out of it. Here, go take on some debt. You'll figure it out. And the problem is that, as I think our young ladies articulated very well, We need to have a picture in mind of a small town that has experienced boom and bust over the last many decades. They watched it in the oil world of the 1960s. When the 1970s came, it was the original building of these missiles. And so we've watched the town grow, we've watched it shrink. And so when you ask what would happen, we've got a pretty good idea what that looks like. We've lived it. And so this time, we would like very much to come into it proactively with some help. I completely agree with the general that we need to come up with a management team to make sure that this is properly, has proper oversight. And so, you know, look forward to making sure that those types of things are in place. So the general doesn't need one more thing to do.
Do you know, Senator, has the Air Force been approached with being a partner and a funding source for this project?
Keep in mind that the Air Force has been leading this entire project. So there have been multiple community events going back years. And so when we talk about the 90th Missile Wing, the 90th Missile Wing that oversees this project, and we're working directly with Colonel Barrington, that she and her team are housed at F.E. Warren. So there has been constant conversation, and it's not only an event, it's been a theme.
Okay.
Basically saying, you know, we'd sure like to not pay for this ourselves.
Good.
So, yeah.
And, you know, I know we've been fortunate to have the Offutt Air Force Base. We're very lucky to have SAC, Strategic Air Command here. I mean, that is incredibly beneficial. I know that they use the Lincoln Airport, and but that rehab of the Lincoln Airport was paid for federal dollars. We did have to spruce up and beef up some of our infrastructure buildings there. But the majority of that task and the funding for that came from the federal government for that very specific project. I'm not saying that this is a great project. I am convinced everybody's done a great job, but I also want to see that there has to be the partners that are responsible for this project should be stepping up.
I think one of the interesting things about this, Senator Raybold, is as Senator Brewer was saying, it's kind of a challenge of, you know, who do you go to help wrestle with this one? Because it's a project of an enormity, such a huge size. And since it's well beyond once in a generation, we've had a few generations, if you will, that have gone by since we've last tackled this, that it becomes a challenge for everyone involved, saying, you know what, there's a uniqueness about this, because Offutt is going to be here in 20 years. Those missiles will be there. This workforce, in large measure, will move on, but here they come. And so there is a unique aspect to what this is. And in our situation, they didn't go do it in the two other communities before they came to ours. We're the first one.
All right. And it just kind of as a reference, normally military, if it's ground they own, they'll put in the infrastructure, sewer, water, electricity, and all that. If it's ground that is temporary, and which is exactly what this is, then they're not as willing to give those things up, because at the point they're done with the mission, then they move on and it's left behind. So it's a part of that community. Therein lies the difference in a fixed base that is there for the foreseeable future and one that they're temporarily using for the project. Okay, other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, that will close the hearing on LB 712. We're going to take a break for about quarter till. We'll fire back up again, and we'll give a bathroom break because we're only one bill down on.